Okay, what we are going to work on now are some different watercolor techniques. They are saran wrap, so that's where you apply plastic wrap to the wet paint, salt, lifting, which is where you kind of blot the wet paint with a paper towel, and wet into wet. Okay, now you should have your supplies ready before you start painting. So I already have small pieces of plastic wrap at my table ready to go. I already have a pile of salt here, okay, because all of these you have to apply whatever it is you're applying while the paint is wet, okay. If you have to go over to the table and get whatever materials, by the time you get back the paint's going to be too dry. So again, this is not obviously a real project. So what we're going to start with is a wash, okay. So what I have on my paintbrush right now is just water, okay? And we are going to apply a very good amount of water to the paper, just in small sections, all right? If we try to wet the whole paper and then apply the paint, the water is going to dry and it's not going to give us the effect that we want. So this is just water, okay, with a big brush. It's because it holds a lot of water. 8th graders are using these brushes to glaze with, so you might want to make sure it's clean before you use it. Give it a little rinse in the sink first. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush just in this little smaller area here. And I am not putting this water on my colored pencil outline, okay? I'm leaving a little space in between the water and the colored pencil outline so that I don't need to worry about my paint traveling into my positive space. So now the paint is only going to go where the water is, okay? It will not go into my positive space unless the water is in my positive space. Okay, so we really want this wash, this is just water down first, we really want this to be a decent amount of water that it is going to let our paint really flow and give us all of the nice qualities that watercolor paint can when we don't have to control it a whole lot, okay, which we don't have to control it a whole lot here. That's all we have to do is keep it out of our positive space. Now I would not actually use these colors, I don't think, with my green hands. I'm using them because they're dark and you're going to be able to see them nicely in the video, okay. So the first technique I'm going to show you is saran wrap, okay. So while the paint is wet, you are going to take small pieces of saran wrap and you just kind of apply them sort of in a bunched up way over the paint, okay. Now here's what you need to be careful with the saran wrap. Even if your paint is not going into your positive space, if your saran wrap goes from the positive space and crosses over to the negative space, look at what's going to happen. It's going to bring the paint with it, okay. Do you see this area right here? So you have to make sure that you're keeping the saran wrap out of your colored pencil areas here. So see, my saran wrap is already all pre-torn, okay, so that I'm not letting my paint dry as I'm, you know, trying to sit here and tear up this plastic wrap. Okay, now if I were you, I would choose one technique for your entire negative space. Choose one of the things that I'm showing you and use it throughout. If you make this too busy, if you use saran wrap and salt and lifting, your negative space could become too distracting, that we're paying more attention to that rather than your hand drawings, okay. You do not have to use more than one color. In my actual painting, I used 4 very similar colors. So I used kind of 2 similar bluish greens and then tints of those where I added white, okay. Now again, I would not use Probably if you're using very different colors, my color scheme was very monochromatic, so I used 4 colors. But if you're using very different colors, I would not use more than 3 different colors, okay? Because again, you don't want to make that negative space distracting. So again, this is where we're just putting down the water. So this is a wash, okay? And I'm leaving a little space between the water and my drawing. Okay, and I'm putting down a good amount of pigment so that my colors are vibrant. And again, have all of your supplies ready. The paint needs to be wet in order to get these techniques to work. Okay, so for this one, we're going to do salt. All right, so this is where you sprinkle, not dump piles, you sprinkle the salt on while the paint is wet. Okay, and you leave it on, saran wrap and the salt, you have to leave it on until the paint is dry. And it's super tempting to take it off so you can see what it looks like, but you're gonna ruin it, okay? If you were to paint over this with the salt on it, the salt wouldn't work anymore. Okay, our last, well, one of our last techniques here is lifting. So this is, I'm going to have to resalt this spot since I just repainted that area. That salt's not going to work there. The salt is going to absorb the paint in those areas, and it's going to give me a speckled technique, which you might remember from 6th grade. Okay. So lifting, we're going to start with a wash. Remember, the paint will not go anywhere that you have not painted the water down first. Okay, lifting. Again, I would only choose one of these techniques for the entire negative space. I know they're cool, but you have to kind of use some restraint so that the negative space doesn't go too crazy. Okay, so while the paint is wet, you're going to bunch up a paper towel. Again, have it ready to go at your table. Okay, and you just kind of blot the paper. This one, again, be careful. You need to kind of control your paper towel so it's not blotting that, like kind of spreading it into your positive space. Okay, so it makes it kind of like a little bit sort of splotchy. I'm going to see what happens if I layer some of this on here and then do my lifting again. It's probably a little bit more of a subtle technique. Okay, and notice once my paper towel gets kind of saturated with paint, then I scrunch it and kind of move to a different dry area. Don't ever rub your paper though, okay? Because then you're going to tear up the fibers of the paper. Okay, so see what I mean? You need to be careful that you're not getting this into your positive space. Make sure you're controlling that paper towel. Okay, don't rub the paper though. Okay, and the next technique is wet into wet. So this is where we're going to apply some water. This is getting a little bit bluish in here because some of this is spreading over. I'm going to switch to my little bit smaller brush. Okay, little section here, so I'm going to just kind of go slow so I don't paint my water into my hands. Okay, wet into wet is we're going to wet the paper, and then you can paint into that with obviously more wet paint, and it'll just kind of spread and bleed and kind of just do its own thing. Or you could apply the water and apply maybe like that pink color, and then while that's still wet, apply some of the darker sort of purplish to that so that they just kind of mix and bleed together. Now, the salt and saran wrap, you're not going to be able to see right now what they look like, but I will leave this out. Once these are dry, I'll leave it out so that you can see these once they dry and we remove the salt and the saran wrap. Okay, remember, choose one and limit your color scheme for the negative space, okay? So that we're allowing your positive space to be the focal point. Okay, and it should be fun.